Good morning, everyone. Just waiting for people to join in, and we will get started shortly. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining challenge number 5 webinar, Multi-Level Security for Coalition Space Domain Awareness in C2. My name is Brandon Florian. I am with Starburst Accelerator. We are the commercial entity supporting US DoD and UK MOD on the Allied Defense Accelerator, culminating in International Space Pitch Day in November. So we are truly happy to welcome everyone to the series of challenge webinars that allow you to hear from the challenge stakeholders and understand better what they are looking for, what problems they are facing, what needs and gaps they have and need to be addressed by you, the commercial startups and companies out there looking to help with this particular problem set. For those of you joining us for the first time, I'm sure Zoom is not completely foreign to everyone, considering we've mostly been using this to keep in touch with the rest of the world. Really quickly, just to give a quick overview as far as functionalities that we'll be using today. At the top right corner, you have a choice of whether you want a speaker view or a gallery view. So that will let you see either everyone who's presenting in a tile format, or if you just want to focus on the person who is speaking and having their particular face on the screen, then you can keep it in speaker view. Below, we have the Q&A function, which we'll use at the end of the challenge webinar to address any questions that you, the viewers, might have, and we will pose it to the panelists for them to answer. So you can use the Q&A function by clicking in there. And then the chat function, not really too useful unless you're trying to get a hold of myself directly or send a message to myself or one of the panelists, but I would recommend that all Q&A be done through the Q&A function. For those of you that have not logged in before or have joined any of our previous challenges or missed the challenges last week, you can definitely go to the International Space Pitch Day website, which we will put in the chat below for everyone to see. There we have all the recorded webinars from last week that you will be able to access and see the content that was shared last week. So definitely you're able to go back in there and see those. Additionally, I would remind everyone that if you are considering and participating in this challenge, you do need to register by the 19th of August, I believe, which is the registration deadline. So that deadline is a requirement for you to then submit a proposal by September 2nd, but you do need to be registered as a supplier in order for that to be a possibility. So again, please go to the website. All the information is on there. I will put it in the chat for those of you who don't have it. And with that, I will turn this over to Captain Busby from SMC to give some quick introductory remarks, and then we shall start.
Hi, everyone. So Captain Murph Busby, SMC, particularly portfolio architect under Mission Innovation. So first of all, thank you for joining us today. Hopefully we're able to answer a lot of your questions about how you get engaged with us. I come into the program as part of the programmatic team helping to run the effort. So specifically coming from Air Force Space Pitch Day, now doing the International Pitch Day. So this is kind of it's a very rare opportunity, a very unique opportunity to not only connect with the U.S. and our Department of Defense, but also the UK and our counterparts. This really is a monumental occasion we're really getting after, not only our pain points, but really the allied pain points and how we come together as, spacefaring nations. So please ask questions. Feel free to reach out to any of the panelists after. I'm sure Brandon can provide points of contact for them as well. Again, thank you. Hopefully this is super beneficial. So back to you, Brandon.
Great, thank you, Captain Busby. With that, I would like to introduce our challenge chair for today, Flight Lieutenant Ryan Holden. So, Flight Lieutenant Holden, please activate your camera, unmute yourself, and the floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, so good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So the challenge that we're looking into for Challenge 5, I'll just give a brief narrative of it, and then we'll go down to each of the stakeholders and discuss their views. So Challenge 5 is enabling the multi-level security for common and user-defined operational pictures to support multi-nation space domain awareness and command and control. And the preface of this is, as the commander of a combined force space component, I am responsible for a coalition force with sophisticated space capabilities. In order to support combined operations with my space capabilities, my operations center must be able to create space operations plans and issue it to subordinate units for execution. To ensure shared awareness across the coalition force, other coalition members need visibility of the space planning and execution process, including intelligence and information across multiple security levels. This awareness will be enabled by a common operational picture, which includes bilateral and multilateral information sharing across multiple security levels into a commonly accessible pool. So first thing I'm going to do is turn over to Tony DiCarbo. If you could just give us your views of the challenge, first of all, Flores, please.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, this challenge, multi-level security, probably is the most important challenge for the Combined Force Space Component Command. Again, I'm Tony DiCarbo, the technical advisor for Combined Force Space Component Command CIFSIC. I report to Major General Shaw. The CIFSIC is a component of United States Space Command. There are two components, United States Space Command, the CIFSIC and also the Joint Task Force for Space Defense. CIFSIC is it has the operation center of the CSPOC, which is where our combined operations, combined in this case, meaning between all different partners, all different allies. That includes commercial providers as well. So conducting combined operations, so you can understand how important multi-level security is. And I think this is also going to be one of the more challenging challenges to discuss, because we can't get into a lot of the specifics about the multi-level security, right? But the operations that we conduct, the combined operations at the CSPOC, have to be at the secret releasable and the top secret releasable level at a minimum. Now, what does that mean? What that means is we have to be able to transfer data, information, a common operational picture, command and control. We need to be able to plan. We have to have integrated operations. That's what this means. And we have to have it at those multiple levels, and not only at the individual secret releasable levels and the top secret releasable levels. We have to have it be able to go between the classified levels. I know that I mentioned JTFSD, their operations center is the NS, their operations are at a different classification level, but they also have to be able to be integrated into this multi-level security as well. And I know we have some folks, I think we have retired Colonel Carolyn Benishek from NSDC, and I'm sure she'll have a lot better information to provide than I have. But this challenge, like I said, it is, I think, most important, because without being able to pass information, conduct command and control, conduct those combined operations to support the air domain, the sea domain, and the land domain, it's really going to be difficult, because space is contested now. It's going to become even more contested. We have other nations that are competitors, friendly competitors, which is great, providing capabilities, but we also have those who are not so friendly. And you've seen some of the activities over the last week or so, some of those activities that are not so friendly. So I'm going to leave it at that. I think, Ryan, I think that answered your question or statement to open up the multi-level security challenge. And I look forward to the discussion and the questions at the end. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks for that, Tony. So you raised a really good point there about the different levels as we go across the different units. And you've mentioned there we've got Caroline Benishek on the line. So if you'd just like to introduce yourself for us and how you would see the challenge if we can.
Absolutely. And I don't look, it doesn't appear as though I can turn on my camera, but suffice it to say, my name is Carolyn Benishek, as has already been mentioned. I'm a retired Air Force colonel. In my current role, I'm the site director for Dragon Ops at Catalyst Campus here in Colorado Springs. And in that role, I provide operational perspective for innovation and rapid software development to the NSDC. There we go. And so as we stand up the Joint Task Force Space Defense unclassified cell at Catalyst Campus, to Tony's point, this integration and information sharing across multi-level security platforms and multinational space domain awareness and command and control is extremely important. Not only amongst the security classification levels, but also all the way down to the unclassified level, and how that information flow can also go back up across those tiers to get to the appropriate levels and to the appropriate internal U.S. nations, but also across to multinational. As we all know, the proliferation of multi-domain information is radically changing the landscape of national defense, and the ability to have those multiple networks at multiple classification levels, not only secured, but also easily switchable or flexible, to be ideal for command and control specifically. And what do I mean by that? Having the ability to have any source of information instantaneously displayed at any endpoint in accordance with all the proper operational and security requirements in situ is most acceptable. And that's all I have.
That's great. Thanks for your input there, Carolyn. So that lines up with a lot of what we've been thinking about in the UK. So to introduce myself fully, Flight Lieutenant Ryan Holden, OC Mission Tactics Flight at RAF Fylingdales. So I'm responsible for developing the tactics and procedures that we go through to deal with these situations that we're discussing now. So it's a really topical thing for us that we've got here. And bouncing onto that, with what you've mentioned, having those things where the information is readily accessible to each user as we go, that's part of it. This isn't a new concept that we're looking at. So if we look back at air defense across units across the world, especially for Europe, as we move into the NATO allies beside us, we're easily able to find the data that we've provided from our sensors to another sensor across the country, and then that's passed out to the command centers as we go. For space, we don't currently have something of that quality, and that's what we need. And it's those tools that can provide us that input into those sections as we go. And I think that the point that you raised of the speed of it, classification of data at the moment is very mandrolic. I'm pretty sure most people on the call would agree. And it's nailing it down to that metadata behind the scenes. Is it knows it's come from that sensor at that classification, and this person can access it. So if we can get to that level of speed, it speeds up that speed of operation for us, and that will allow us to move into a lot further things. Now, I'm just going to hand over to Colonel Belmont from US Army if I can, for him to provide his take on the challenge at hand.
Right. So my background with respect to this particular problem set is mostly Schriever war game, as my experience with working with allied partners and coalition partners. So I'll start by saying that with respect to the Five Eyes, there's very little that isn't shared with the Five Eyes at this point. That's pretty much across the board. There are a few areas in the SAP channels maybe, but those walls are breaking down as well. And that's the area I primarily work on at Schriever. Where the issues are going to be are with the other coalition partners, and as we experienced with Schriever War Game, trying to integrate the French, the Germans, the Japanese, the Koreans, and a multitude of other nations that show up. And so first thing is we have to stay on it with the exercises and the war games as probably the focal point of where to break down those barriers, how best to do it. Second is, I would say we probably need to start thinking about how best to duplicate the networks we do that with now, like BICES, which is the Five Eye network. And then, of course, the various Centrix systems that are out there in Afghanistan and that we used to use in Iraq have proven fairly useful at breaking down those barriers, or at least allowing some flow, though constricted, for intelligence and data. And then, again, probably the last scenario that applies is Afghanistan for how best to integrate coalition partners in the data sharing. And if we can tackle it from all those angles at once, then we're probably going to make some progress on those channels. Over.
That's great. Thanks, Kel. So that's a really good point as well, is that the information with the coalition, if it is the coalition partners, why should we not be able to share the information with them as long as it's within the classification realms from where we go from there? And it's that speeding up that data transfer between each thing. So at the moment, getting my data to one of your systems may take quite a bit of time. In space, we don't have that time. So if we're looking down to normal systems, so at Filingdales with our radar, we could see something and passing it on to Thule for them to look into it. Currently, you've got the middleman in there of going through the 18th, and it's got to bounce through those channels. It's that, right, we see something, pass it on to them, and work as a tactical brigade of units as we can keep bouncing that information along and to develop that autonomy between the units as well. Just hand over to Richard Boller as well, if we could, Rags, and see your point on the challenge that we have.
Okay, thank you very much. I've been sitting here and listening carefully, and I don't think the issue any longer is Five Eyes. I think we've got that, or getting to the point where that's getting worked out pretty well. I think it's to the issue of what are we going to do with information that may come from a source such as, let's take an example, Afghanistan or something like that, or France or Germany, and people don't want to share other information with these countries. How are we going to work that back and forth? That's the type of things that we're looking at. I've got several activities going on with the Air Force Satellite, or excuse me, the Air Force Research Laboratory, looking at this types of things. And but this is absolutely where we need to go. And as someone said when we started this discussion, this is probably the most difficult of all of the challenge areas that we have. Over.
Yeah, thanks, Ray, for that great input. So it was something that was mentioned on the last webinar that we had as well from Tony, mentioning the combined operations and the combined training. So it's one of those things as to, if we can't pass on that data between each other, how can we train together for all of us to build up that experience? And I think that's one of the really important parts of it, because not only do we have to build that bond between the data, but we also have to build the bond between how do we all work with it and how do we all process it from that point. So I think that's one of the really key points. Unsure whether Tony has anything else to add from that side, apart from the last webinar, from anyone who wasn't there.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, like I said, this is going to be one of the more challenging challenges to discuss. It's really the technical solution of transferring data between the different levels. I don't know that that's the biggest part of the challenge. The biggest part of the challenge is the agreements and the policies that you talked about, having to go through the 18th SPICs, to get to Thule. And you're right. There's a lot to this challenge that is not just technical, but has to be considered in the technical solution. And again, from the last webinar we had, we talked about how we go forward. So a demonstration, a small demonstration of a capability, probably between the US and the UK SPOCs, I think are the way to go. And then SMC through, I mean, U.S. Space Force now provides the capabilities for CIFSEC. I failed to mention that last time. I know we had RAGS on last time, and I forgot to mention that U.S. Space Force does the OT&E, provides the operations training and equipping for the CIFSEC, for the ops centers. But the demonstration then would go with Space Force and SMC to provide those capabilities, and including the training. And in fact, to be perfectly honest, Rags broke up a lot, so I didn't really get to hear a lot of what he said. But I did want to bring that forward, Ryan, based on what you said from the last conversation we had about how we go forward with this this challenge, and understanding that the challenge is more than just a technical solution. Over.
Yeah, so great point there, Tony. There is more to this than meets the eye. As Tony said really early on in the telecon that we're just having, this is probably the biggest issue out of all of the challenges that we have. And it's because we need to get all these ducks in a row for this to even be attempted. And it's that point of, if you're a company who's looking at this and saying, right, I don't know how I'm going to fix your policy. Well, that's up to us. We'll figure that out. It's getting those tools in place that would provide those steps over the barriers that we see. So, for example, if we've got a system where we can tag something with a piece of data, so Fylindale's radar, for example, I can tag a piece of data. I'm happy for that piece of data to go to this country, this country, this country, this country. And the system knows from what I've done with that piece of data that you can send it on to those people, rather than waiting for me to release it, almost as if there's an automation to the security level onto it that's obviously really strictly coordinated at the start, but it just cuts out that lag time. In space, we don't have the time to wait. It's not like air where we can see somebody coming and flying over, and we've got a period of time where people will respond. And this is where I throw it back to the air defense. We'll hand over something to a different country if we see it coming. And it's the same way that air defense has worked for years. Currently, that link isn't there, and that link needs to be there. So even looking away from hostile acts as well, that cooperation between different countries. If we have a re-entry up in the geo belt where the GPS satellites are, etc. Sorry, not GPS satellites, but where most of the satellites are that we'll be looking for most of our services in daily life. If there's not a re-entry, a breakup over in that belt, then the impacts could be catastrophic. And I think no nation would be happy with that going on. So it's having something there which is not only to deal with potential hostile acts, but for naturally occurring events in space that we might need to look into. Carolyn, have you got any thoughts on that?
I'm sorry. I couldn't find the unmute button.
Yeah.
So, so as I heard what you said, it got me thinking about just data curation as a whole, and the importance of having the ability to manage the data once it's given. It probably doesn't go to your point exactly, but I think it's an important thought for all of us. Once that data is actually given at differing classification levels, how relevant is that data? How true is that data? What is the provenance of that information and data? And can it be usable at each of those levels for integration into any repositories or data discovery or analysis, and true utilization of that information, which I think is going to be the je ne sais quoi of what we all do in the space domain.
Yeah, thanks for that point. And it does line up with the way that I've sort of envisioned this challenge is those different levels of it. We're not expecting somebody to be able to break this challenge down and say that here's the solution. There's going to be multiple people who are sat on this call thinking, all right, I can do that little piece of the pie for you. And that's what we're interested in. We don't want that one whole solution at this point because it's too big. So it's the multiple ideas that we haven't thought about that we can bring into it. So we talked about the stumbling blocks as to what we find are the limitations we jump in. So I've mentioned one is to jumping into Thule, for example, to pass on the data to them. So if we're looking into avenues like that, what else could you say that is a stumbling block for the security side of things for you? And I'll open that up to anyone on the floor.
I can tell you from
Yep.
the unclassified commercial augmentation cell, we have an air gap between unclassified to getting that information to the NSDC. It's all sneaker netted right now. And of course, dealing with the aspect of our center being able to ask the right questions at the unclassified level to get to the problem set that they're looking at the classified level.
Anyone else have anything to add on that one?
This is Colonel Belmont. I'd say that your problems are more attitudinal than they are technical. The networks are out there to do that with. It's just a question of implementing them and get the decision-making process done. But operationally, I think we do pretty well. I work the acquisition side more than the ops side. And sometimes I have to carbon date the paperwork that comes across my desk to see when it started, to see when I was going to be able to release data, even to the Five Eyes, much less our, AFRICOM partner nations like that. So I would say the problem there, the attitudinal problems are far greater than the technical challenges that we face to overcome these barriers. Over.
Thank you, sir. So I think what we're looking at there is we've got the different views from all of the different stakeholders on this call already, and we're beginning to see that that is the complexity of this challenge. One thing that Caroline's mentioned there is the data and the different data sets that line up within things. So one of the frustrations that we do get as well is that if we put an unclassified piece of data onto a system, we're locked down at that level. Getting those extra things on top of that. So then you're relying on somebody doing the analysis after the fact and thinking about what the differences were between two different systems and two different views. Being able to compartmentalize that and see it all within layers, like you would do on Photoshop, etc., and just layer those on top of each other. And you can see exactly what's happening in each place from the different sensors that come online. And I think that's one of the massively important things that we've got there as well. So just looking into that as we are now, and just opening up the floor to any other points that I may not have raised so far, if anyone has any further thoughts on the challenge.
So this is Tony Ryan. I think to help out our providers from a CSPOC perspective to conduct those combined operations, and you notice that I keep hitting that combined operations because that is really the key to our success. I mean, the incidents of last week, it showed the strength of a combined operations, or a couple of weeks ago. It showed the strength of the combined operations just in messaging. So I keep hitting combined operations, but what the CSPOC really needs to help our providers is some sort of a tool suite. And this comes from the February 2020 CSPOC mission needs statement signed by the then commander, Scott Brodeur, who's actually going to be the commander of the NSDC. So there's a good tie there. But in his note to the mission, to the development community, the CSPOC requires a tool suite that enables collaboration between U.S. coalition commercial partners at the secret releasable, top secret releasable levels in order to facilitate training, exercising, data sharing, planning that informs and supports combined space operations and efforts. The solution should include information sharing tools, catalog, conjunction assessment, ability to understand how we trade off capabilities, how we may have to shed users from one capability to another, and to support a common operating picture at multiple security levels. Over.
Thanks again, Tony. Yeah, so that pretty much lines up exactly with the challenge that we have. It's that straight, clear-cut thing of we've got the different challenges in line for the policy and the tech. So for different people within this call already, we've established that the tech is good enough for them. But as you move between the command centers, the level of input that they want is different. So it's that user selectable operational picture that we're also talking about, and the analysis that it can provide. So challenge 1 earlier in the week, we spoke about analysis, and analysis after the fact is too slow. It's that predictive analysis that we can jump in from that other sensor and think, okay, well, that could happen. That 80% chance of that happening is better than a 95% sure piece of data after the fact, after the event's already occurred, especially if we're talking about ASATs or possible conjunctions. And these are the things that we need to speed up that efficiency. So I'd put it out to anyone there who is in the audience that it might not necessarily be a piece of work that you're working on which can jump into all of these things. If it's something that's efficiency and it can drive that efficiency of the operation as well, that's another thing to bring to the table. It's something that could be hugely important to us as we move through these challenges. So I think we've gone round at most people's points there. Just looking if anyone else has anything to add, I'll offer it up to the floor for a moment before we jump into the Q&A. Nope. So it seems good. So what we'll do, Brandon, do you want to take over the Q&A part for us, please?
Yes, of course. So we have some questions that have come through. Specifically, the first question is to you, Ryan.
Yeah.
If it says, if I summarize the needs described, the challenge is to present a solution that enables robust and secure multi-domain, multinational exchange of information, primarily within bilateral and multilateral country cooperations.
So I think that summarizes the challenge quite well. It is the movement of data and information between people freely without the barriers in place for policy as well. So it's being able to, as we say, speed. When things are going on in space, we haven't got that long to wait, especially for a potential conjunction or ASAT event. If you're going to have to move a satellite out of the way, you want it to happen fast. And if your mate down the road in another country tells you that that's going to happen, it's just going to foster that relationship between you as well. And it's that cooperation for each other for both hostile intent and possible natural causes. I'd like to fire that question out to anyone else on the panel as well.
So this is Rags. I would say that this question says that we want a solution, and I think we need to go back and reiterate what you said, Lieutenant Holden, that we need the pieces. So take the problem apart, find out from a company standpoint if you have the capability to support and solve part of the solution. Tell us what the solution to that is, bring that forward, and we'll see if that fits in the overall problem dimension. Over.
Thanks, Rags. I think Tony had something to add there.
Yeah, Ryan, thank you. Yeah, Rags, as usual, he hits the keys that I drop out in this. This whole development, we talked about this last webinar as well. The development piece, I think what we're looking for is that demo, that one piece that we talked about, a minimum viable product before, that one piece. And then the way this has worked in the past is once that demonstration capability is accepted, then we go into the Agile development cycle, which has a lot of user engagement with the customers. So user engagement in this case would be the CSPOC, it'd be NSDC, it'd be anyone who has a stake in it to make sure that we have that that common type of solution, and that includes the UK SPOC as well. So yeah, thank you. That's what I had to say. Thanks. Over.
Thanks, Tony. So I think that's both have been summed up really well there. Is nobody's going to be able to come up with a solution which jumps into this challenge as a whole, especially at the level that we're looking at it. And most of you probably sat there thinking, well, I can't see the challenge fully. We tried to discuss it as best we can to show our challenges, But if you have something that you feel could add to this, throw it into the pie. Like, obviously, you're not losing out on anything by just putting that chance out there. So offer up your solution, and then we can select it through from those points. So those both really good points there. Thank you. So back to you, Brandon.
So no other questions have come through, which leads me to believe either everyone got their questions answered already, or people are still trying to digest the information that was shared. But if possible, I'd like to kick it back to the panel and maybe have them give, just a quick overview on what they would like to get or what they would like to see out of this challenge. What particular solutions would be, if they had a list of their top 3 wants, I guess, like a wish list, what would it be?
So Brandon, I'll take the first stab at this. I think a lot of it came out of the quote from the CSPOC mission need statement. But what we need is a tool suite. It's a tool suite that enables us to pass information back between the secret rel level, the TS rel level, okay, up and down. The second thing is be able to pass that between the SPOCs, between UK SPOC and CSPOC and SDC, those operation centers. And the final piece of that, I think, would be some sort of a visualization or a common operation picture, so we can see whatever that information is telling us, whether it's on orbit assets, whether it's ground forces, whether it's air forces, whether it's naval forces, that common operation pictures. Because as I've foot stomped a number of times, the combined operation is all the domains, not just the space domain. We, the CISIC and the CSPOC, provide those capabilities, those space enabling capabilities, missile warning, position navigation timing, satellite communications, OPR. We provide those capabilities to all the domains. So I think that's why it's imperative to have those 3 things. Those would be my top 3. If data sharing, information passing between secret rel and TS rel, passing between our partner SPOCs, and then some sort of visualization to enable decision making. And I know that really ties back to a lot of the challenges we had last week. So I think that would be my top 3. Over.
Can I add on to Tony's top 3? And I'll just add a couple of points. So again, with the stand up of the JTF-SD, the Joint Task Force Space Defense Unclassified Commercial Cell, I would add unclassified to that whole regime that Tony talked about. And then in addition to that, with any MVP, it would be really nice, with the thought of this common operating picture, to really specify the accuracy versus precision. So as we get multiple perceptions of the truth in the data, how do we reconcile best perception and hand off our counterparts the right information to make actionable decisions?
And this is Colonel Belmont. Let's say if there were 3 areas I would work on, and realizing I'm coming at this from a different angle, but the first would be regulatory reform at the top, internal to the Department of Defense, to loosen up the constraints we're working under now. I don't see it happening, but that's where I'd start. The second is ITAR. As an acquisition guy, I would say that revising ITAR could get us further down the road a lot faster than anything else. That'd probably be my number 1 area of emphasis. The third thing would be consider combined projects, where you start out working the project already with your allies, and so it has to start already at a multi-level security level across the nations, and that way you don't have the problems that develop once you're trying to field something.
Anyone else? No?
Yeah, so I'll jump in there as well. Thanks, Brandon. So I think Tony pretty much hit the nail on the head from my point of view. It's that moving things along and just getting it into those things. And jumping on with Carolyn as well, of getting it down to those unclassified levels. As we end up with more and more partners in space, with commercial operations ramping up in space, that data is going to be pretty much unclassified as we go. And it's what we mentioned earlier on in the call is we don't want everything to be at too high of a level so that as soon as we're sharing it with those other countries, we start blocking them off again. And I think that's what Colonel Belmont was saying as well. If those limitations are in there from higher up, but it's looking at those, letting our systems decide for us as well some of the time as to what it is, rather than the person just making the obligatory and just put no foreign on it straight away, and then somebody can't use it. So it's that if there is an element of you can categorize something, so I look at it as metadata. So everyone's aware of metadata in photographs, and it links into there, and there's information behind the scenes. It's taking away that user input, speeds it all up for us, and it's removing that risk of something going wrong. So we can say that that system is classified at that level, and it can go to that person. And it just removes all of those delays and allows us to push on as we go. Obviously, we've got the analysis as well. And so if there is a chance of somebody can add something in there at the analysis, so it's all well and good. We have a sensor that can see something, but after the fact, if we actually look at the analysis in there, it's allowing that sharing of analysis of that data that has been passed between the nations to build on each other's analysis as we go, and working as a community with that, rather than just providing you with a product. If everyone works together to analyze something, multiple heads are better than one. So we can jump into that part. Unsure whether Rags has anything to add.
I had 2 words written down, but they're really 3. And the first word is instantaneous. I mean, we have to have this immediately available to us. As you have said before, we don't have time to go back and do the analysis after the fact. And we must have confidence and confidence. We must have confidence in the data itself, and we must have confidence in the security of the system itself, which is passing the data to us. So those are the types of things that I think are critical as we look at the development of this type of a system. Over.
Just
Great.
to add on to Rag's point, we in Dragon Army right now, we are an arm of AFRL, and we currently are a conduit of helping to share data via the Unified Data Library. We conduct ops days at the unclassified level, but across our global partners with France, the UK, and Australia as well. And also we're integrated with the Sprint Advanced Concept Training, SAT-Ts, if you have heard of those events, to bring in, at the unclassified level, to bring in all of the commercial providers to help to engage and to pass up information at the right security classification levels.
So one potential model to look at might be the intelligence community, which for several generations now has run with tear lines. So where you can pass the gist of the intelligence forward without actually getting into the problems of things like the source data, and you tear off the tear line, the source data remains hidden, the data moves forward. That's a good starting point, I think, for solving a lot of these problems here, since oftentimes source data is going to be what drives your overall classification level.
Awesome. So I have another question that came through. As we begin to get better at integrating multiple sources of data, for example, 2 surveillance systems reporting on a single satellite's position in different locations, are you concerned about reconciling which may or may not be more accurate or higher confidence?
I'll add a thought on that one, and I know I can see the other panelists sort of thinking about this question as we go through. And it's one of the things of they're both important, and it's a case of, if we look at it, having that heads up that something is happening is key, but then also we need to build on the accuracy as we go. And as we build as a community working through these things, as we can put these multiple sources of data together, you get higher fidelity. So more looks on a sensor, if we can get the right angles looking at it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and we can keep building on that data, it will actually enhance the fidelity as we go. So both of them are really important. I'm sure what anyone else thinks.
So this is Regs. Let me jump in there for a second. This is a problem that we've been looking at for a while now. We call it sensor data confidence. And that is, how can you express to a commander or someone else that the information that you have taken from a sensor is viable, valuable, and he can use that to make a decision. It's absolutely critical that we get this right. And but it's a science in and of itself to make these determinations based on all the flood of data that we have coming in at this point. Over.
Okay, so I spent 7 years on crew at Cheyenne Mountain, almost all of it active duty, and really there's a human factor here as you evaluate those sensors. So I won't call it a gut call because over time you learn which sensors you're going to go with, which ones are more reliable, and that can vary based on look angle, proximity, how fast the data are processed, and what the data tell you, and the amount of detail that come in. You just have to learn the systems you're dealing with, and that's the best way you're going to come to resolution on which sensors you're trusting in which environments and which instances.
At the,
this is Tony, and I'm sorry, Caroline, real
okay.
quick, I'll
That's
let
okay.
you. I think this question really gets to almost standard day-to-day ops. I know, the 18th SPICs would do this, and some of the folks at NSDC. I want to just make sure that we don't look at holding and preventing those type of functions in order to support a multi-level security solution. Those operations have to be conducted and maintained at whatever classification they need. And then that data will then be addressed by this solution. That's what this challenge is about. And Carolyn, I apologize. Go ahead.
No, to your point, as we, again, I'm speaking from an unclassified level at this point, although on active duty, I've worked in other realms, but at the unclassified level, right now, what we're doing is taking information from the 18th space. We're taking information from commercial SSA providers, and we're trying to create an ensemble catalog that will help to reconcile a lot of the information and data so that we can spit out a correct product, if you will, in helping to do those, comparisons across multiple sources and not specifically just the military systems.
I think that lines up pretty well. Just had a few points passed through to me from one of my colleagues as well. Is within the air defense world, I've spoken about it a few times, we have track quality. So you'd look at a track and you'd have the system's confidence on that track. And I think to add into the part that the question asked is, yes, they are both important, but if you can provide something that analyzes the quality of that data, and that throws into Colonel Belmont's point of there is going to be a human in the line there somewhere. But if you can assist them in their gut feeling, and that is the point that he raised earlier, if there are sensors you get used to and you're confident in, that sensor might not be good all of the time. But if you can tell us that this sensor at this point in time is well within its parameters, I'm confident in that track. If there's something that can do that as well, to assist that gut feeling and the operator who is on the console at the time, it's always a good thing as we go through that.
Okay, there are no more questions that came through. So with that, I'd like to hand it back to Captain Busby if he wants to add any closing remarks or any last thoughts.
So just again, I want to say thank you to everyone for joining along with the panelists. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to Brandon, get some of those links out there. But yeah, overall, we're really looking forward to it. I think the biggest piece to take away is that we are asking a lot. However, if you have something, no matter how big or how small, that you think can solve a piece of it, bring it forward. Because you never know if you're going to bump into where we're going to be able to synergize, and ultimately where we're going to be able to actually solve this, in the near future. So again, thank you. Brandon, that's all I have. I appreciate you guys running everything and doing everything from a logistical standpoint.
Great. Thank you, Captain Busby. So I did lose my train of thought. I was going to say something, but I think Captain Busby covered it. But again, yes, please visit the website. I put the link in the chat earlier in the discussion. Oh yeah, I remember what it was going to be. So as far as reaching out and asking any questions, there is a specific email set up on the website that you can see and access, and you can address any questions related to the Allied Defense Accelerator and the challenge there. And we will do our best to get it answered by one of the stakeholders for you. So if memory serves, I believe it's ada@starburst.aero. So very simple, Allied Defense Accelerator, ada@starburst.aero. That is a generic email for asking any questions related to this accelerator. Again, these webinars have been recorded. They will be posted up on the website, so you're able to go back and reference them if you missed anything. And with that, again, we would like to thank you for participating in the webinar. Tomorrow, we have our last webinar, and this one is for the webinars next week, so it's slightly different. But there is one more challenge webinar tomorrow, and that one starts at 8 o'clock in the morning, so Pacific time, so 4 p.m. in afternoon in London. And yes, so again, all the information is on our website. If you are interested in participating in that last webinar, we look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning. Again, thank you so much for your time this morning. I know 2 hours to sit and listen to different challenges and webinars can be somewhat taxing, but we appreciate everyone's time, and hopefully we will see you guys participating in this challenge. So with that, have a great rest of your day or evening, wherever you are in the world, and we will talk to you later. Have a good one.